Hurricanes are frightening. There is no other way to put that. From tiny little Category 1 storms to the Category 5 behemoths, there are few things as powerful and as destructive as a hurricane. So we thought we would look at some of the most devastating hurricanes on record. Speaking of devastation, we would be devastated if you didn't hit that subscribe button and turned on the notifications as well. In 2005, after scarring Tampa and St. Petersburg metro area, Hurricane Charley rapidly intensified and moved into Charlotte Harbor as an intense Category 4 hurricane on Friday, August 13, 2004. Charley was the most powerful hurricane to strike the U.S. since Hurricane Andrew destroyed parts of southern Florida in 1992. Charley's intense eye wall crossed through the cities of Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte, causing heavy damage. Charley accelerated as it quickly moved northeastwards through the central and northeast Florida, blasting intense winds through the Florida peninsula. Orlando recorded maximum continuous wind speeds of 79 miles per hour with a high-end speed gust of 105 miles. And in Daytona Beach, an EF1 tornado ripped through the southern sections. Charley would make a second landfall south of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and tracked into southeast Virginia before losing its tropical characteristics. At the time, Hurricane Charley had become the second costliest hurricane in the U.S. history, with damage estimated around $15 billion in 2004. Charley injured many, and 10 people lost their lives. Making landfall in the Florida Keys with a pressure of 892 millibars, this Category 5 Labor Day hurricane of 1935 is the most powerful hurricane to ever hit the United States. The hurricane went from a Category 1 to a Category 5 as it moved from Andros Island in the Bahamas on September 1st, 1935, to the Florida Keys on the evening of September 2nd. According to the NOAA, maximum sustained winds at landfall were estimated to be 185 miles per hour, with storm surge reaching 20 feet. The NOAA says the winds caused 408 fatalities, primarily to construction workers working in the area. Many victims were waiting for the arrival of a train from Miami that would evacuate them. However, it never arrived since much of it was swept from the tracks by the hurricane. Sandy was a massive hurricane with an expansive wind field, which sent a destructive storm into parts of New Jersey and New York. "41 of the 72 direct deaths associated with Sandy in the U.S. were related to storm surge flooding. A total of 650,000 houses were either damaged or destroyed by Sandy, mostly from storm surge and battering waves. Sandy affected 24 states, including the entire eastern seaboard from Florida to Maine and west across the Appalachian Mountains to Michigan and Wisconsin, with particularly severe damage in New Jersey and New York. Its storm surge hit New York City on October 29, 2012, flooding the streets, tunnels, and subway lines and cutting power in and around the city. Around 8.5 million customers in the Northeast lost power due to the winds from Sandy. Some were without power for weeks. The damage estimate for Sandy is $65 billion, making it the second costliest hurricane in United States history. As it traversed across the Atlantic, the 1938 hurricane was only a tropical storm which intensified and was upgraded to a hurricane on September 15, 1938, off the east coast of Puerto Rico. By September 19th, it began to turn when it moved north to Hispaniola. Of course, at this time, it was a full-fledged hurricane. The storm reached Long Island and southern New England with great ferocity, packing a high storm surge and incredible wind gusts. The tide completely enveloped Fire Island on the south side of Long Island. More than 150 homes were destroyed at West Hampton. There was massive destruction to coastal areas on Long Island and the coastal areas of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Wind gusts of over 180 miles per hour were recorded at the Blue Hill Observatory south of Boston. In Providence, Rhode Island, they experienced terrible flooding as the tide, even inside the city, rose to almost 14 feet. The 1938 storm was a Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Damage exceeded $306 million, and 256 people were killed in the storm. Hurricane Camille devastated the Mississippi Gulf Coast. At the time of its landfall on the night of August 17, 1969, the pressure was 900 millibars. The exact wind speeds in Camille were never known, as the wind measuring instruments near the core of the storm were destroyed. The storm surge of 24 feet in southern Mississippi set a U.S. record that would later be surpassed by Hurricane Katrina. Because Camille was compact, the devastating surge focused on a narrower swath of coastline than Katrina did. More than 140 people lost their lives as a result of Camille's landfall, and another 113 perished in Virginia from flash flooding resulting from the storm's remnants. This gigantic Category 5 hurricane crushed Puerto Rico and only weakened slightly before hitting southern Florida. The storm made landfall near West Palm Beach with winds of 145 miles per hour. In the city, more than 1,711 homes were destroyed, but the impact was worse in Lake Okeechobee. Storm surge caused the lake to overflow and put the surrounding area under 10 to 15 feet of water. Numerous homes and buildings were swept away in Belle Glade, Canal Point, Chosin, Pinocchio, and South Bay. At least 2,500 people drowned, but it is possible this number is as high as 3,000. While crossing Florida, the system weakened significantly. It curved and briefly re-emerged into the Atlantic and made another landfall near Edisto Island, South Carolina, with winds of up to 85 miles per hour. Andrew was a small hurricane, but it packed extreme winds. Estimated to be Category 5 strength at landfall along the southeastern Florida coast. The pressure at landfall was 922 millibars. After striking South Florida, Andrew made a second landfall in south central Louisiana as a Category 3 hurricane. The intense winds caused catastrophic damage in southern Florida, destroying or damaging approximately 127,000 homes. Andrew's total cost was $26.5 billion, mostly in Dade County, Florida. At the time, it was the most costly natural disaster in U.S. history. Incredibly, a landfall just a few miles north would have caused catastrophic damage to downtown Miami and Fort Lauderdale. The eye of the hurricane passed over downtown Miami and parts of Coconut Grove and South Miami early September 18, 1926. Residents of the city, unfamiliar with hurricanes, thought the storm was over and emerged from their places of refuge out into the city streets. The lull lasted only about 35 minutes according to the NOAA. The worst part of the hurricane brought 10-foot storm surges onto Miami Beach. As the hurricane moved inland, water from Lake Okeechobee was blown toward the southwest shore and the town of Moore Haven. A weakened muck dike that had been constructed to protect Moore Haven broke in several places. About 150 people drowned in the floodwaters that persisted in Moore Haven for weeks afterwards. The Red Cross reported that 372 people died in the storm. Damages in 1926 dollars were estimated at $105 million, which would be more than $100 billion in today's dollars. The 1926 Miami hurricane made a second landfall in Florida near Pensacola before moving in a weakened state to coastal Mississippi and Louisiana. The deadliest hurricane in U.S. history hit the upper Texas coast in 1900. It began as a tropical storm in the central Atlantic and followed a path of South Hispaniola. As it moved over Cuba, it remained a tropical storm. It rapidly intensified and reached hurricane status as it passed just west of Key West, Florida. The hurricane made an abrupt turn into the west in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. As the hurricane approached, the winds grew fierce and the tide rose quickly. Wind gusts of over 120 miles per hour pierced Galveston Island and the seas rose to over 20 feet in height. The Galveston Hurricane was a category on the Saffir-Simpson scale. An estimated 8,000 to 12,000 people lost their lives, mostly in the Galveston area. More than 3,000 homes were destroyed, and damage was estimated at over $30 million. The storm maintained tropical storm strength as it tracked up through Oklahoma and Kansas. It then weakened and moved through the Great Lakes, over St. Lawrence River, and back out over the North Atlantic Ocean. Hurricane Katrina, like Andrew 13 years earlier, struck both Florida and the central Gulf Coast as a damaging hurricane. But unlike Andrew, Katrina's greatest fury was reserved for its second landfall, and its most catastrophic impacts were from storm surge rather than the wind. Katrina delivered a billion-dollar blow to South Florida as a rapidly intensifying Category 1 hurricane. But after it emerged into the Gulf of Mexico, Katrina strengthened into a monster. At one point, Katrina's central pressure dropped to 902 millibars, the lowest pressure observed in an Atlantic basin hurricane since Gilbert in 1988. Katrina was also a large hurricane, guaranteeing a devastating storm surge as it approached the north-central Gulf Coast. Katrina first made its landfall near Burris, Louisiana, with a pressure of 920 millibars. It remains the lowest pressure on record for a Category 3 landfall. Instead of a focused core of powerful winds, Katrina's energy was distributed by a larger area of strong but not as extreme winds. The large field of strong onshore winds pushed catastrophic storm surge into the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Peaking at an estimated 28 feet around Waveland and Pass Christian. The highest surge on record in the U.S., the surge penetrated 6 miles inland across most of the South Mississippi and up to 12 miles inland along bays and rivers. Over 200 people lost their lives in Mississippi, mostly due to the surge. Water also pushed west into Lake Pontchartrain, leading to a storm surge of 10 to 19 feet. Water also surged into the network of canals and channels around New Orleans. And the subsequent overtopping and breaching of levees and flood walls eventually combined to flood 80% of New Orleans. It would take 6 weeks to remove all of the water from the city. Katrina claimed 1,577 lives in Louisiana. And that is the list. Which hurricane do you think is the most powerful ever on record? Will we ever see something higher than a Category 5 in our lifetime? Let us know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to our channel, watch our other videos, and visit our website.